To begin with a kind of Simon Roper-ish apology, I'm sorry that this isn't my usual kind of video, but as a friend and colleague of Simon's with some of the same interests, activities and preoccupations, I wanted to do a quick review of, or reaction to at least, his brilliant new feature film, The Mystery of the Romans. Let me quickly get out of the way a kind of warning that if you've only ever seen or only like mainstream Hollywood type movies, the kind that make lots of money at the box office, then The Mystery of the Romans isn't even trying to be one of those. But that aside, no allowances need to be made for the film's low budget or anything else. Thematically, it's pretty Gen Z, but I think that makes it all the more interesting. And the themes are really interesting, fascinating, and the whole treatment of it, the story structure, the performances, the look, the sound, even the visual effects, yes, there are visual effects, are more creative and original than you'll find in a lot of, or even most, mainstream films. The first time I watched it, I've seen it 3 times so far, I did keep getting associations with other films, but then it hit me that most of them are by geniuses, which must be a good sign. So with another apology for my very boomerish and probably irrelevant frame of reference, I'll include some of those here. The Mystery of the Romans is set during the 2020 lockdown.
I had a more isolating lockdown than a lot of people, because we never called each other, me and my friends. We only texted. I started trying to imagine them reading the texts. So
the constrained locations make total narrative sense, and anyway they're presented very richly. The story in simple terms is about 2 young people, Luke and Livy. Luke is a podcaster with some of Simon's interests. They're isolated separately in lockdown, and they explore their respective hang-ups by exchanging texts and voicemails, and then by experimenting with LSD. Given that Simon's most popular videos are the ones where he acts out characters, it shouldn't be surprising that his performance is fantastic. It's funny, touching. Also great is Esme Moriarty as Livy, Luke's counterpart, or mirror image, or alter ego even. Luke and Livy are actually in complementary distribution. They're never on screen at the same time. I don't think so anyway. So the film has a kind of mirror structure where the protagonist changes halfway through, a bit like David Lynch's Lost Highway, for example. But the film that this kind of dual exploration is bound to call to mind, at least for anyone who's old enough to have seen it, is Ingmar Bergman's Persona. Luke and Livy are male and female. They're northern and southern, dark and blonde, etc. And their neuroses are mirror images too. Their acid trips are a sort of experiment into free will and how much we can or should feel guilty for how we are.
You are guilty for that and not guilty for that, and I think it's just crazy.
Which is where the film's title comes from, by the way, but you'll have to watch it to see exactly how. Shortly before Mystery of the Romans was released, Simon posted a video about naturalism in films, a kind of apologia to prepare his viewers for aspects of his film that might seem boring next to mainstream films. Improvised dialogue that apparently meanders compared with dialogue that's heavily scripted to be punchy and keep the story moving. Capturing reality is something Simon and I are both interested in, and I'm looking forward to discussing it further with him, maybe on camera if anybody's interested, because I think our sensitivities are in some ways quite different. I certainly think naturalism's very relative. Just after Mystery of the Romans, I saw the latest Mission Impossible, with Tom Cruise famously doing lots of his own stunts, which of course is a kind of naturalism to make the whole thing more real for the audience. Whereas this brief clip in Simon's video, not one of my favourite films, has 2 characters going into an empty cafe and deciding to sit side by side to have a conversation, which I find about as impossible as Tom Cruise's mission. I'm not saying any of this to suggest that Simon's wrong. He isn't. But what I like in his film, at least as much as its lifelike qualities, are its many ingenious conceits and contrivances. I think Simon himself more or less says in his video that naturalism is good for lulling the audience into a, forgive me, false sense of reality, so that the supra-mundane moments, when they come, are all the more striking. In Mystery of the Romans, there's even a kind of tentative nod towards time travel at one point, where a character seems to turn round in response to a sound.
Yeah.
And see his future self, which immediately took me back to The Ultimate Trip, Kubrick's 2001. It's a trope that 2001 fanboy Christopher Nolan reprised, whether it was deliberate or not, in Interstellar. Probably that musical similarity is just a coincidence, but a reviewer or critic, like an academic, inevitably tries to integrate the thing they're discussing into a bigger picture and see patterns that maybe the creator wasn't aware of. Of course, the creator feels like they're making a long series of their own artistic choices, but if free will is questionable, well, where do those choices come from? I suppose it's a mystery. Oh yes, I loved Tom Burchell as a tiny part of a scary kind of Greek chorus or a guilty conscience or something. Or maybe I'm way off yet again. Anyway, do see the film and decide all these things for yourself.